M to the third power has two contrasting styles. At the beginning here, we've got Marcato, and then we've got this legato section from 27 to 43. The vast majority of M to the third power is in the Marcato style, which requires short and quick bow strokes. And a lot of times when I hear orchestras play this piece, what's missing from the style is the articulation. Many of these melodies and harmonies are intoned in the lower ends of the instruments, the D string, the G string, the C string, bass is the low E string. And those strings are going to require more grip on the string. A thicker string is going to have more mass, and you're going to need to overcome inertia to be able to activate that string. So your activation force is going to be higher on the lower strings than it is on the upper strings. When you're playing Marcato, this effect is compounded because each note is short, so it has space in between each note, and you're going to have to reactivate every note. And if you don't have grip on the string, and if your students are playing without rosin on their bows, this is going to be really hard to do. Where I hear this problem the most is on the 16th notes. And there are places where there's 16th notes just running continuously for many, many measures at a time. Without getting that grab on the string, the students can sound really sloppy, and without the defined articulations for each note, it doesn't really sound very clear, and you don't hear the melody within the correct style, and it just sounds odd. When I'm talking about grip on the string, I'm not talking about how you grip your bow. That's not what I'm talking about here. We hold our bows, we don't grip our bows. I'm talking about how the bow grips the string. And I don't want to be confused either with grip and weight. Grip is not equal to weight. And this is going to be a huge problem, for instance, at 64. If we have too much weight, we're not going to be able to achieve these mezzo piano markings. And further along in measure 102, when the first violins come in, they're at piano and they're playing the same thing. They're playing on the D string, and they're going to need some grip in order to articulate. But if they're using too much weight, it's going to sound too loud. So they need to figure out how to grab the string and wiggle that string side to side. That's kind of where the grip is the ability to tug and pull on that string, which provides the activation force. Playing really heavy is going to do something completely different. Whether we're playing Marcato or legato bowings, a good entry point for these articulations are straight eighth notes. We can have our students play Marcato eighth notes, and then we can also have them play legato eighth notes and show them the difference. One of the problems that I tend to hear with the legato section is that students retain the Marcato style with some of the eighth notes. So they're no longer playing connected and smooth, they're playing short and choppy. And where this tends to happen the most is after slurs. In the compound time measures in the legato section, the third eighth note is short, but the eighth notes that follow are supposed to be legato again. So you're going to have to get your students to play the third note short, and then if they brush off the string for the third note, which I think they probably should, legato at 29, lots of fluid wrists, not short and choppy like they have in the Marcato section. Disambiguate between Marcato and legato so that the students are comfortable playing Marcato eighth notes and then legato eighth notes. And then you can work on some of the other rhythms, the quarter notes, the 16th notes. Most of the stuff you're going to want to play in the middle of the bow. I talked about that earlier in the rhythm section. But again, for the articulations to match, make sure everybody's in the same part of the bow. And for 99% of orchestras out there, that should probably be the middle for most of this piece. except for maybe some of the tied half notes and the second violins and violas, like 102 through 118. That section right there, they can use the whole bow for that. The next matter of style is how we're going to stylize and interpret this fermata in measure 43. There's a couple different ways we could do this. We could sustain the A and then come directly into the 16th notes with no space in between, or we could add a lift or add a pause, a caesur, or something in between the two sections. The thing is, it's not marked to do that, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's an invalid interpretation, but Harold Nunez wrote a lot of other things in here. If he wanted there to be a space there, why didn't he write it? If we are going to do it that way, we're going to have to do something about the bowing, or else we're going to be bowing everything backwards in violins and violas coming into 44. There's a couple of things we can do. In 42, in the compound measure, we can brush off of the third eighth note with another down bow. So down, down, brush, and then up bow on the fermata. For cellos and basses, it doesn't really matter because they have a rest, while the violins and violas have the anacrusis. Another thing I've wondered about this piece, and if you know the answer to this, drop it in the comments section. At the beginning, the cellos and basses have a G, open G for basses more than likely, and G on the D string more than likely for the cellos, while the violins and violas are playing that descending tetrachord. But after the fermata, cellos and basses are resting here, and everything else after that is similar to the beginning. And another reason why that's odd to me is that the harmonic inference of that descending A, G, F natural, E, I don't think centers around any sort of harmony that necessarily contains a G. So that's unusual to me. It seems like we're leading into tonic, so perhaps a dominant or something along those lines, which would be A major. In any case, if you know the answer to that question, please, I've always wondered about that, so drop a comment below because I'm here to learn too. All right, once we start nailing down the style with the open strings, then it's time to start stylizing using dynamics. Now, dynamics aren't necessarily a product of style, but when we play dynamics, we also have to retain the style. So if we have a crescendo, for instance, or we have a rise or fall in the dynamics, we need to make sure that we can still play marcato or legato given what's going on here. I talked about the difference between grip and weight, and I think that will apply too. But for the crescendos and for the decrescendos, like in 60, 96, and 101, we've got 16th notes that are getting softer. So as the students play and they're separating and they're getting softer, we don't want them to lose the grip on the string, or else they're going to get softer and muddier as they continue to play. With the 16th note crescendo, we're not going to have quite as much of a problem, but it might be a good idea to have them play 2 bars of 16th notes, 1 eanda, 2 eanda, 1 eanda, 2 eanda, crescendo for a measure, decrescendo for a measure, all on open Ds, so that they can articulate independently of the dynamic. They can get louder and softer and still make the same articulation regardless of dynamic. I think that would be a perfect exercise so that they start to understand the difference between grip and weight. I really like the use of accents here in this piece. They're used fairly sparsely, and they're used to show where the emphasis is. For instance, in the compound measures, Nunez would like the first eighth note to be emphasized. 1, 2, 3. And then the following 2/4 measure, 1 and 2 and 1, 2, 3. So the beats are being accented. And this is a cool effect because it highlights to the audience that the meter is changing, because with the accents, they can feel the downbeats, and it helps to disambiguate the eighth notes. I think in a lot of pieces of music, accents are either overused or they're substituted for other articulations, and sometimes that works okay, and sometimes it's just confusing. Like if you've ever played Dvorak, for instance, there's no question about how things are going to be articulated. You know, there's sforzandi, there's forte piano, there's accents, there's Marcato accents. Like he just knows what kind of sound he wants, and he defines them. He defines these expressive markings in terms of articulation, but if you have to really study it and learn a lot of Dvorak before you understand what's what. If you're not as familiar with the composer and they're using expressive markings as articulations, well, are they the same usage that Dvorak used, or are they something else? What exactly do they want here? But here they're used as a means to highlight or emphasize certain parts of the music. In the next video, I'm going to go over some common problems, some mistakes that a lot of orchestras make that I didn't already go over earlier. Again, this piece is very well written, so most orchestras tend to play it very well, and the mistakes they make are far and few in between the good stuff, the quality playing that they do, because the techniques that are difficult are used fairly sparsely. The trickier finger patterns are used, a couple of times and only in certain instruments. And so, but, it would be good to make the piece as clean as possible. So I'm going to go over some of these small spots and give some tips and tricks for how to make them better. So we'll see you in the next video when we talk about common problems.